In this video, we're going to have a look at some aspects of playing the bass on the keyboard and the way that it's been implemented in Scarbee Bass. Okay, so there's a major difference between a stringed instrument and, say, a piano, in that we can actually play the same pitch on different strings on a bass guitar or other stringed instruments. Whereas on the piano, obviously, one key can only play one pitch, so you can't play C3 at different points on the instrument, whereas you can on a bass guitar. And on the bass, that's the bass player's choice to choose where they want to play the note on the actual bass guitar. Now, with the Scarbee series, for each pitch that you can play on the bass, samples have been included for that pitch on different positions on the instrument. And that makes the instrument a lot more realistic, because obviously playing a note on, say, the E string or playing that same note on the A string is going to have two different sounds to it. And that's the same throughout the instrument, of course. Now, a lot of the time, the bass player is going to try to minimize movement of the left hand, the fretting hand, which makes sense. You wouldn't be playing kind of wild jumps on the instrument because it's going to make the playing less smooth. So the script that goes on in the background has been designed in the same way to be able to minimize the movement of the left hand. Now, this is an automatic script, so it's not something you have to achieve using the key switches. Okay, so when we play something on the keyboard, you may notice this dotted white line here. And that's moving up and down the keyboard as we play. Now, this represents the position of the fretting left hand on the bass guitar. And when we play a note on the keyboard, it automatically chooses a position that minimizes the movement. And this way we get the full sound of the instrument. So for example, if we're playing octaves on the instrument, it's going to use the correct samples that relate to the strings of the bass that would be used if a bass player was playing this for real. Now, we're going to go on to look at articulations later on in the video series, but you'll see this little menu down here shows us the last played articulation. So at low velocities, I'm getting a mute there, and you can see what finger being used to play it. And at higher velocities, I'm getting sustained notes, and obviously when I was holding down two notes together, I was getting a hammer on. And playing kind of monophonically, I'm getting sustained notes at high velocity. So basically this menu here will show you your last played articulation. Now, the bass guitar strings are obviously monophonic, so you can't play two notes at the same time on the same string, and that's reflected with bass. This line here gives us left hand position, and this tells us our last played articulation. Now, this is our main menu up here. I'm going to go through these later on in the video series, but it means you can go in and make changes to the way that you play and trigger samples with bass. Now, this is automatic, so we don't have to actually really do anything here. This is going on in the background, and it's making sure that the correct note and the correct string is being selected. But there is a way of overriding this and doing a manual string selection. Now, the way we do this is using key switches. So key switches is a way to basically play notes that are outside the range of the bass guitar and use them to affect the notes that are actually being played within the range of the bass guitar. So for example, if we play E0, so an octave lower, you can see up here, I've got the display showing us the note. Now we can make sure that the notes are going to be played on the low E string. Okay, let's try A0. That's going to make sure they're played on the A string. And if you see on our articulation menu here, it's now got an A next to it. And actually playing the same notes sounds slightly different when we play them on the E string and the A string, as you'd expect. Next we have D0, which is going to make the notes played on the D string. Then finally we have G0. And there we have the notes played on the G string. So if you want to, you can override the automatic string selection and make sure the notes are being played on the string of your choice. Now we can hold down these string selection key switches multiply to select multiple strings. So let's say we wanted to play something on the E and the A string. We can actually do that by holding down E and A at the same time, and we can then select the notes to be played on the E and the A string. So you can see on our menu here it's telling us that we're playing on the E string and the A string. Whereas if I was to choose the D string and the G string, you can see it's actually selecting those two strings there. Now another way we can interact with this is by using key switches from F5 to B6. So again, outside the range of the actual notes we'll be playing on the bass. Now this means that we can try and keep the playing around certain frets. So let's say we pressed F5. You can see up on my meter here, my kind of MIDI meter, that I'm playing F5. Now, if you look at our playing position, we're kind of centered around this first fret. Now I'm playing up high. It's still trying to keep it around that first fret. Whereas if I don't have F5 selected, you can see that our playing position is moving around a lot more. F5 down again, and you can see it staying where it is. So if I press F#5, you can see it moving up to the second fret. Going up to G, the third fret. You can hear actually it's triggering a fret noise as well when we go up to that fret. So that's kind of mimicking moving to that fret and having a bit of fret noise there. Different fret noises are actually triggered by different jumps in pitch. So that goes all the way up to B6. So you can see now that we're right up high on the bass now. And obviously, if there's not a pitch up there representing the note we're playing, it's not going to be able to play it in that position, but it means it's going to favour playing it up on those frets. I'd say for the vast majority of applications here, you're going to want to leave the automatic script to be able to choose the correct note and the correct string. Okay, so in this video, we've gone through the automatic string selection and the manual string selection, and also just a little kind of look at the interface of how things work. So remember, when we're playing, we have this little line here which tells us where we are on the bass. Now, as we're going to look at later, we have different articulations, and they can be triggered by velocity. And this menu down here is going to tell us the last played articulation. So you can see it's a mute there, and it's telling us what finger it is and also what string we're playing it on. So it's A string, a mute, the index and middle finger alternating. Now, we can override this by pressing E0, A0, D0 and G0 to be able to make sure that we're playing those notes where possible on those strings. And also we can use our key switches from F5 to B6 to try and center our playing or focus our playing around the frets of the bass. But as I said, I think for the majority of applications, you're going to go with the automatic string selection. Okay, so now we've covered the string selection options in MM Bass. In the next video, we're going to have a little overview of our key layout before we start looking at our articulations.